Welcome to the Cyber Insider. I'm Luke Connolly, your co-host and the partner manager at Emsisoft, and I'm joined by Brett Callow, my co-host and threat analyst at Emsisoft, and also our special guest today is John Hammond. John is a cybersecurity researcher, educator, and content creator. As part of the threat operations team at Huntress, he spends his days analyzing malware and making hackers earn their access. Previously, as a Department of Defense Cyber Training Academy instructor, he taught the Cyber Threat Emulation course, educating both civilian and military members on offensive Python, PowerShell, and other scripting languages, and the adversarial mindset. John regularly speaks at security conferences to students at colleges such as the U.S. Naval Academy and other online events, including the SANS Holiday Hack Challenge and KringleCon. He is an online YouTube personality showcasing programming tutorials, CTF video walkthroughs, and other cybersecurity content. So, John, thank you very much for that's quite an intro. Thank you very much for putting aside the time to be with us today. We're very, very excited to have you with us.
Well, hey, thank you all. Very, very flattered and honored to come join you all here, and just thankful you're willing to let me crash the party. I don't know if I'm an anomaly here, but hey, I'm in the circle of greatness. I think you two are running the show, and I'm just happy to be part of the team for a bit.
Well, we're just really pleased that you offered to be on the webinar with us. So thanks again. And let's just do a little bit of background. So, how did you get into cyber? What was your career path like, John?
Oh, sure thing. So, oh man, I guess I'll be super quick because I realize it can be a little bit boring, and I don't want to bore folks with intros or backgrounds and all. But so I grew up sort of like any silly kid, thinking, "Hey, I want to make video games, or I want to be a hacker, like I see in the movies." So at that time, I thought I'd Google, thought I'd research, thought I'd look online how to hack, typing that into Google, right? So I think even in high school, middle school, whatever, trying to learn, hey, what's this whole Python programming thing? What's this Linux thing? What's a web server running all these things? And I got into that and just thought, oh, maybe I'll build things, I'll write software and code. It wasn't until I kind of got into school, I attended the U.S. Coast Guard Academy for my undergrad. The government and military cares a little bit more about like, hey, it's nice that you made this thing, but can anyone break it? Are there vulnerabilities? Are there weaknesses? Are there flaws and bugs? So that opened the door for, I don't know, the whole wide world of cybersecurity. And then that's sort of, I don't know, been the trajectory. YouTube's been along on the side here, getting into the industry with some teaching stuff, getting into the industry as a little bit of an operator, and finally found my home, and I'm loving it here with Huntress for my day job. But that is really what lit the match, I think.
Awesome. It's great when you can find an area of interest and translate it into a career. So that's great to see. And of course, as you mentioned, you're a prolific YouTuber now for over 10 years. And in preparation for this, I did a little analysis of your YouTube, and well, actually, you released one just this morning, and I was looking at it. You did a post on Fish Tank. And you got into the hacking content about 10 years ago. But by my count, you've released over 1,200 videos on your YouTube channel over the last 11 years. That's quite productive. It's quite prolific. So how's the content and the production changed over the last 10 years? And by this, I mean, do your technology demonstrations tend to follow what's being seen in the wild, or do you sort of lead with what you find interesting?
Oh, well, hey, thank you for your interest, first of all. It's always been sort of a pet passion project, just a labor of love, sort of grown into its own thing. And it's been a lot of fun to see it blossom, and really, really fortunate on that front. So thank you for all that interest. I feel like, hey, it's small stuff. It's cutesy. It's things that I'm interested in. And with 1,200 videos, apparently it's quantity over quality, I suppose. But no, for trajectory and theme, it's fun that it's sort of been an outlet for me, for what I'm either doing in my life and what's in my world at the moment, because you might be able to see a strange evolution of content, whether it's old, silly, bad programming tutorials where I thought, hey, I'm kind of learning this thing just as well. And then it evolved to capture the flag and training and exercises and being hands-on keyboard to really get into this. As I kind of moved into Huntress and more in the industry work, it's like, hey, can we explore some malware samples, some cybercrime over in the dark web or those corners and crevices, tracking ransomware gangs, or just looking at oddball stuff. And I don't know. I like that the channel's named John Hammond, right? It doesn't have some brand of, oh, cybersecurity 101. It's whatever John has an interest in putting out there. I have that little bit of leeway to do that. John Hammond starts to do cooking. Hey, whatever, put it on YouTube.
That's awesome. And I was just sharing a screenshot of your YouTube channel. As you said, it's just _ John Hammond, one word. And lots of content. I'm going to be looking for some specific coffee related content soon. Something always of interest. In terms of Huntress, so you work in threat operations at Huntress, and I'd just like to mention that in the security industry, we tend to be really supportive of each other towards a common good. And for example, our teams at Emsisoft and at Huntress worked together on a very high profile incident from mid 2021, almost 2 years ago, and we'll probably do it again. So we're happy to have someone from Huntress or someone from any other, potential competitor on, as long as we're talking about things of interest to our customers, to businesses. So for Huntress, a lot went on from a corporate perspective in 2022 last year. There, you released EDR functionality, you acquired a security training company. There was a new round of debt financing. So what's new at Huntress these days? What's going on?
Oh man, goodness. And again, hey, thank you for the interest. I am loving it there, truth be told. I think we're moving and shaking. I think we're in the trenches and on the front lines, and hopefully doing it right, or doing it the best we can. Hey, I'll be the first to admit, I joined Huntress way back in August of 2020. But at that time, I would have been employee number 28, 29, or 30. Now, hey, I don't know, us chatting in February of 2023, we're at like 280 or 290 employees. And hey, looking on what Series C going to look like, as you mentioned, the new round of financing, and hey, some acquisitions here and there. What can we build? What can we buy? It's all exciting stuff, and I'm just happy to be part of the team. Some of the cool things that, I don't know, might be interesting, at least anecdotally. You mentioned rolling out EDR. We have a Mac agent that's coming to life. We are wanting to bring in some of that security awareness training. So it's protection, not just for the endpoint, but protection for the user. M365 or Microsoft 365 is part of that just as well, with protecting the identity. It's really, really interesting to think, where's security going to go in the next year, 3 years, 5, 10 years, and then doing our best due diligence with the R&D to help. Our target, our TAM, right, total addressable market, and some of those buzzwords have been always managed service providers and small mid-market businesses. We have this cheesy tagline, hey, cybersecurity for the 99%, because we want to raise the security poverty line for folks that don't always have the budget for this, or the resources, or the time, or the manpower. So it's an interesting challenge. And I think there's a lot of real value to, like, how can we bring top of the line, top tier security to the mom and pop shop down the street, to the lemonade stand on the corner. Not to that extreme extent on all cases, but doing our best, trying to be with the community. And there's a line I think we hear from other communities that we're with, a rising tide raises all ships. And I hope we can echo that the best we can.
That's awesome. Yeah, interesting. A couple of things you mentioned. Number one, the Mac is, we're actually coming out with a Mac client as well. So
Excellent.
I think that we see the same requirement out there in the market.
Oh yeah.
And with Series C coming, actually that foreshadows something I want to talk about a little bit later, which is the impact of the economy and private equity or venture capital on the security industry. But I'll come back to that. You mentioned MSPs. So MSPs for small, medium business can be really helpful because it allows them to outsource the technical aspects of their operations. And a lot of them, it's not really core to their business. A lot of companies, small, medium business, it's not core to their business to understand the in-depth requirements to maintain a network and PCs. So for MSPs, managed service providers, what are some of the most common mistakes that you see from your perspective, you see them making?
Oh man, right into the lion's den, I suppose. I I always feel bad answering this sort of question because I feel like it's such a boring answer. Like it's the same stuff we've been shouting from the rooftops forever. Like, hey, disable and turn off public facing and internet exposed RDP or remote desktop, like dumb stuff. Use a stinking password manager, get two-factor.
3389.
Oh no. We're security by obscurity here. We put it on 3390. No one's gonna find it, right? That's a joke. Let me say that clear. uh, but it's it's the security hygiene. It's the security awareness. I think we might get into some other fun conversations in the even soon that we're like, hell, what about all these 0 days that I see in the news? What about all this hot, sexy elite stuff that's making headlines? Look, that's rarely used for, I think, an everyday business. You save that stuff for the hard targets. And even then, it's not all that hard. I hate seeing a whole lot of stuff, the fluff that says, hey, a sophisticated actor breached, and there's the bad B word, our environment. No. Threat actors aren't sophisticated. If you boil it down, it's a macro enabled Word document that says, please click here. So sorry, I'll get off my soapbox, but
So probably from, just looking at the numbers, I don't know what the numbers are, but I would imagine more than 90% of breaches are probably RDP or successful phishing attacks.
I don't know, Brett. Hey, can I ask you for a sanity check here? Am I running down the wrong tree?
Yeah, I would guess somewhere like probably 70%.
Something up there.
30%
More
are
than half.
things. But you do raise an interesting point when you talk about us having been banging on the same drum for a long time,
Yeah.
disable RDP and so on and so forth. How do we finally start getting that message across?
I wish I had a good answer, because I don't, and I don't think anyone does. I think the best thing that we're doing is trying to, I don't know, get that education and awareness out there. Sometimes it's in really weird ways. Sometimes it's like, hey, let me show you how this happens. Like, let me show you how this gets. And even if it's like, look at this weird ransomware operator site. Look at the messages that they post. Look at their internal chats when those are available. Like how this has become such a commoditized and plug and play, press the easy button industry. I think that can get a little bit more eyes raised when you bring it to someone's face, bring it to them and tell, look at how this happens. That I think tells a bit of a better story than, hey, we popped a 0 day with some insane, unruly, extremely esoteric thing. Don't get me wrong, that happens, but I don't think it's the immediate concern that most organizations and companies need to have front of mind right now.
So
yeah, to my mind, this is a concern. We just don't seem to be improving our security posture. We have the same problems now that we've had for years.
Can I ask you, Brett, if that's all right? I don't know, a little bit of turn the tables here, but I always see you kind of sharing some of the leak site ratings over on Twitter. Is like, hey, here's how the look and feel and the customer support and service provided by cybercrime. I don't know what brought that on, or I don't know what's going on in your head, thinking like, hey, this is worthwhile to bring to folks.
I think it's been a natural evolution as more and more money has gone into the cybercrime economy. They have been able to legitimize their operations. Legitimize is really the wrong word there. I mean, make it more business-like. And that is the gradual transition we've been seeing for years now.
Wow.
So that being the case, and I think you answered this, but I want to ask it explicitly anyways. What are some of the most common ways that MSPs are targeted by threat actors? are MSPs targeted in different ways than generally a general SMB would be targeted?
Yes and no. I think, and what I think I'll drive that towards is a managed service provider is the mothership. You know, that's the queen bee at the hive. It's the one to many, like, root of the tree relationship between multiple organizations. And those businesses, those companies that they support could very well be dentist offices, hospitals, lawyer firms, hey, sure, a store, or government municipalities. It could be practically anything, because hey, not all those folks are super smart and savvy on technology and security. So when you can outsource that, it's an attractive thing. But then you inherently get like a weird single source of failure bottleneck that is what happens when your managed service provider is compromised? What happens when your RMM is hijacked and you're pushing down malware to every single one of your clients, and it's ransomware Armageddon? Hey, sorry, I know that's super doom and gloom, and I don't mean to go that far out on the limb, but that's weird things to think about. And I think that's why MSPs are often a target. And you're asking how they're often compromised. It's boring, dumb phishing emails. And sure, hey, we've seen some of the sweet stuff out in the news, whether it's ESXi hosts or vulnerabilities that just haven't been patched because it's old legacy deprecated stuff, or it's TeamViewer. It's the gamut, but I can't think that, oh, it's anything super elite and sexy, truth be told.
Have you encountered any instances where MSPs have been specifically targeted as opposed to it being random phishing attacks?
Not for MSPs specifically, or at least off the cuff. I don't think I could get just right off. I obviously, I think, hey, we could chat about some of our collaborative work during the Kaseya VSA days and that ransomware. I feel so bad, and I see just spray and pray. Threat actors, adversaries cast a wide net because it's only potentially going to get one hit, and then we're back in business. And that's what's enabling a little bit more of, I think, that cybercrime booming industry that you were mentioning. Info stealers. I think we could probably pull that thread a little bit more, but I haven't seen a coordinated, specifically targeted thing on one MSP. It's always just, if we just start smacking this out towards the internet, what falls out?
And I found it interesting, as you mentioned Kaseya VSA. So that was the incident, or one of the incidents that we worked on jointly. Our companies worked on jointly a couple of years ago in 2021, and that one, Kaseya VSA, is an RMM, remote management and monitoring, and because of this multiplier effect, attacking Kaseya VSA had the outcome of multiple of their customers, which are often MSPs, getting attacked, and that, I would say, got the attention of some three-letter acronym agencies, which may or may not have been involved. And anyone who's interested can do a Google search on news and find out that suddenly a lot of the companies found their keys somehow, found the keys to the ransomware encryption somehow. And I don't know how. I wasn't around at the time, but I'm not sure that anyone else does. But it sort of speaks to the fact that, the larger targets and RMMs or MSPs, if they're a force multiplier for the bad guys, do represent large targets, will start to get the attention of the government and possibly invoke a larger response than the bad guys anticipated.
If I may, to sprinkle in a little bit more on, I think, your question there, Brett. And forgive me, I guess I'll use a buzzword, but I think the supply chain is a thing that we kind of acknowledge, even if, like, sure, hey, it's silly to use the word, but knowing that the pipeline of software and dependencies, sure, you could throw a Log4j wrench in the works, but we draw this analogy to when you're at the grocery store. And hey, you're just picking up an apple, you're picking up an orange. You don't know what truck that came on. You don't know what farm that was grown on. You don't know how any of these, I don't know, poultry, any of these meat, anything that you're kind of is purchasing and using in your own security stack, big air quotes here. You just don't know sometimes. And I think those are conversations that we have, and like, hey, let's hold the industry and the community, even vendors, even us, all participants, a little bit accountable. Because look, we all need to be in this security thing together. It takes a whole village. An anecdote, if I may. I don't mean to be rambling, so please forgive me. Cut me off if I'm yapping too much.
Please do.
There was one that we were chasing a little bit ago that was a success story, I think, and a positive win, because we had found some vulnerability in a backup manager. So it used to be R1Soft Server Backup Manager, and then it got acquired by Continuum, that got acquired by ConnectWise, and that's its own weird supply chain. And that's, of course, sold to MSPs and then trickled down to small mid-market businesses. And the vulnerability was in a library that was bundled into the code that was used to deploy and create the software. So it's like, whoa, paradox and fractal of supply chain, maybe, where sure, if you use this authentication bypass and maybe you mixed it with a little bit of sweet SQL injection, maybe you could fire off some remote code execution, connect that to the registered backup agents. Sure, compromise the backup server, but then push down ransomware, malware, crypto miner, whatever, to all of those connected backup hosts. Wild and crazy thing. I'm grateful that we were able to kind of get in front of it and get things patched before we saw widespread exploitation. But those are things were like, whoa. Shodan says there are like 20,000 of these servers out there. Kind of cool that, you know, we're trying to fix these things before they're compromised and taken advantage of by the bad people.
Yeah, and just sorry, Brett, go.
Are you seeing better backup practices now? Are threat actors less able to delete or encrypt organizations' backups? Is that an area you think we've improved?
Oh shoot, put me on the stand here. I guess I'm going to be again doom and gloom. I don't think I've seen the improvements yet. Have you, Brett?
Yeah, I think we may have seen
Yeah.
improvements actually. They're not able to get to the backups as often as they can, which could be part of the reason why we're seeing fewer ransoms being paid now. According to stats from companies like Chainalysis.
Right. It is good to see less ransoms being paid. I'm curious if that is some of the legislation, some of the regulations, some of the stuff saying like, hey, thou shalt not pay ransoms, or if it's just not happening. I guess I don't know, not being a victim.
Just to, I just wanted to expand on something that you talked about a moment ago, which is the whole supply chain thing for the non-technical people like me. A supply chain, you mentioned specifically Log4j being a wrench, and Log4j is a library which basically, if you're going to write code, you're not going to write all the code. You're going to take a bunch of libraries, plug them together in such a way that you're adding value and delivering a product. So all of those libraries, some of them are open source, some of them are not, but all of those libraries represent the supply chain for software development. Log4j in particular, when it came out, when was it, last year, the year before? Yeah, when it was announced, December. It was like, oh my God, like every fifth server on the internet was using it. So, you know, it's not that all of these companies have bad coding practices or they don't have security forward aspects to their operations. It's just that code is incredibly complex these days, and it tends to be made up of lots of modules which are combined in a way such as to add value.
Thank you for kind of adding that context and coloring the picture there. I'm sorry, I was steamrolling right along.
No, you're way more technical than I am, so I just want to make sure I understand.
Nerd and geek, that's all.
Just last question on MSPs, because I want to get to some really interesting topics beyond that as well. So do you think most businesses need to be concerned about the super stealthy, highly sophisticated attacks? Can they stand a fighting chance against these threat actors who seem to be smarter than our own good guys?
So yes, with an asterisk, with a really big footnote, with a really big disclaimer. I feel like that comes last, because I know I don't want to be counterintuitive to everything I was just kind of stating here. Like, get the basics, get the boilerplate, get the building blocks in place first, and lay the foundation for that defense in depth, for that, hey, cybersecurity matrix, for that NIST, yada yada yada. Folks know we again are repeatedly saying, hey, this is what we're kind of subscribing to do this thing right. It's just hard to see that in action, and I'm understanding. I think we all know it's hard, but the, again, sexy elite stuff that's making headlines, the Chat GPT. If we open that can of worms, if you're still running Windows 7, you got bigger problems, right?
If you have RDP open, don't come talk to us after you close it.
You can have your AI and your machine learning after you turn on two-factor, right?
Exactly. Chat GPT, I'm glad you brought that up. So I actually, it's been all the talk for the last few months, and I actually never knew what it stood for, so I thought I'd look it up. Chat generative pre-trained transformer. So it's a product from a company that Microsoft has been funding massively, and it's basically a chatbot, but it's incredibly prolific and useful. So first everyone got excited and thought, gee, this is really fun. I can do all sorts of things. And then some people started to raise some flags and concerns. So like, my question is it something that in 5 years is going to be one of those, what were we thinking moments? Like, for example, Tom Scott, who is he's a technology YouTuber as well, compared Chat GPT to the disruption that Napster started in the late 90s. And he said that he's terrified. Napster, of course, completely turned the music industry on its ears. So I'm wondering, can we even know what the risks it poses might be? And as you think about that and answer it, I'm just going to share a screen, which is, where did it go? There it is. I actually asked it, I went to ChatGPT and I said, write a Python program to process all of the videos and the number of views in each of John Hammond's YouTube channel. And it proceeded to write me a Python program that did just that. So, what can it do next year? Who knows? And it's, what are your thoughts on this?
Oh,
is it a risk?
One. Well, there are a lot of opinions, and I'm excited to hear from both of you just as well. I think, I don't know what's going to happen next year or 3 years or 5 years down the road. Don't have a crystal ball, not Nostradamus. But I think we have seen a rapid growth and development. Like, there were a couple of weeks ago where we were just typing stuff into like Hugging Face to print out a silly picture, and you might get a couple different randomly generated pictures of what prompt you just gave it. With Chat GPT, now you've got text. Now we're seeing others that are like, hey, what if we do this thing for like generate video? Or I might be getting the name wrong, Midnight Summer or something, where it can just, again, profile pictures or anything. It's funny because we all have this spooky conversations of our AI and robot overlords going to take our jobs. Weird thing. I always thought, we're kind of, at least in our industry, in the security community or tech or IT, I think we're a little bit safe and guarded. Even the silly YouTube stuff, like videos that I make, robot's not going to be able to do that. Not to be the entertainer or the showmanship, but there are literally live streams fully generated by artificial intelligence and algorithm. Like, there's literally a Seinfeld constantly streamed on Twitch that I think got banned for some bad inputs that said not safe for work stuff. But the proof of concept is there, and that's weird and fascinating. And I'm sorry, again, rambling But to tie it to security, again, super curious on Brett and Luke and your thoughts. Whenever I've asked Chat GPT for something, for some code, for some even malware, it could give me something, but not all of it, but not everything, not enough to make it work. I think, Luke, we were bantering even before we started to press the record button. Hey, it's cool that it generated this Python script, but it's not going to like press play and run because you've got to hook in credentials and get some other things set up.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and the interesting thing, I mean, what it does is it can largely, at this point, only present information which it's able to gather from other sources, right? Whereas someone who's an actual creator is generating something new. Now, artists, by and large, artists and intellectuals have largely built upon the work of previous artists and intellectuals throughout history, and that maybe this is doing it more efficiently than we're comfortable with. And if it's able to do so in a way that, for example, kitty scripts, you know, someone finds a script that allows them to attack their teacher's PC. If it makes someone who's not particularly prolific at malicious acts, if it makes them more malicious or more effective, then it's something maybe we should be concerned about. But, you know, it all remains to be seen, right? And then the question of, you know, it's a Microsoft product. What is Microsoft's responsibility and what are they going to do? What are your thoughts, Brett?
Yeah, I think short term it may help the dumb bad guys improve their code a little, which could be a nuisance. Longer term, I've really got no clue where this will end up. I just don't know.
Right, it'll be interesting to keep an eye on it. What I'd like to do is switch over. Sorry, John.
No, if I may sprinkle in one last thread, I think I like to test the water. I like to see, hey, what could you do if I'm a threat actor or a cyber criminal? Hey, Chat GPT, can you please write some ransomware for me or write some malware? And the guardrails will say, no, hey, I'm sorry, that's against our ethical code of conduct or whatever. It just, we won't do that for you. Sorry, Dave. I won't open the pod bay doors. But if you say, hey, would you please generate some Rust code that will iteratively or recursively loop through every file on the file system and then encrypt it with an AES SHA-256 whatever crypto scheme, and then add a file extension for like dot whatever? Sure, it'll just spit it out. If you get a little bit more specific or you just kind of work within those realms, maybe it can get you something rather than nothing. But you have to have the know-how to even ask for that to begin with, and then you'll have to have some of the smarts to fix it up and correct it and where it was wrong and where it just didn't work. So you're right. I think, Brett, like super small, low tier, and you're right, Luke, maybe some script kiddie stuff, maybe. That's a nuisance, as you mentioned, but I don't think it's an AI revolution. I haven't drank the Kool-Aid yet.
Awesome. So what I'd like to do is switch over more to talk about some cybersecurity things. And one of the things, you know, this is our second episode of this webinar. Our first one was with John DiMaggio last month. And one thing that puts a really human perspective on cybersecurity in general, and John, you as a researcher, and Brett, you as an analyst, is that sometimes you get a reminder that while you're looking at the bad guys, they're also looking at you. And we saw this with John DiMaggio just the week of our webinar, where Lockbit actually used his promo shot, his profile shot, on their own online profile. And John and Brett, I know that you've both achieved the same sort of infamy, I guess. So maybe tell me about that, and I'll just put some of them up on the screen for reference.
Oh, Brett, hey, you go first, my friend, if that's all right. Do you want to get the ball rolling here?
Yeah, sure. And I think this basically comes down to the bad guys wanting to tarnish the reputation of the good guys. The less the victims are willing to engage with negotiators, with law enforcement, the better the bad guy's chance of extracting a payment. It really is as simple as that. And sometimes, of course, it's simply a matter of them striking back in anger.
Yeah, you and John DiMaggio have gotten some big ones, I think. Hey, between either it's a note on their on their leak site or on their posts, or they set their profile to it in one of their hacker forum underground stuff. I think I'm small time. Hey, I think I've earned one of the random strings in some malware sample or something. I think Mustang Panda got a John Hammond team or something silly. There was a Print Nightmare little proof of concept that I wrote with another security researcher that landed in the Conti ransomware playbook, and that's terrifying. Very, very strange, gut-wrenching stomach feeling when you see that in their leaked playbook. And they're weird and wild stories, but I'm right there with you. We see it with like Lawrence Abrams. We see it with other reporters or other folks trying to get info out there. I recorded this video on Fish Tank and was realizing this is an old service, but there had to have been a conversation where adversaries, hackers, threat actors are going to like abuse this by repeatedly submitting spam and adding misinformation and trying to tear down the good that service would have offered. And it's weird to know that the spotlight might be on you for that. And I don't know if you have that same feeling, Brett. I see a strange turnaround because of the silly YouTube stuff. Hey, when I am showcasing a interesting new command and control framework, Havoc, the Havoc C2 framework was in the news just recently, like a couple days ago. Hey, you seeing that for real threat actor campaigns. Or, oh, whoops, it was undetected by Windows Defender at the time or other antivirus solutions, but the next day, hey, some people were watching, keeping up with this. Now it's detected. Now it's the cat and mouse game all over again. So you're right. Very humanizing to, I don't know, have this mirror reflection, knowing the bad guys are watching too.
And one thing that you mentioned, sorry, go on, Brett.
I was just going to say, and quite uncomfortable at times too.
They must be trying to intimidate you to some degree as well.
Yeah, that's absolutely happened in some case, and some of our own team have received direct threats against them. That hasn't happened to me yet, thankfully, and hopefully it won't.
Right. Yeah, and just about Fish Tank, to add something specific that you mentioned, John, in your video, is that in order to accomplish some of the functionality that you can do with the site, Fish Tank's a site that allows, it tracks over 8 million websites that are known bad. Like you go to these websites, it'll try to get you to log into as if it's your Amazon. It'll look like Amazon. It'll try to get you to log in. All they're doing is stealing your credentials so they can log into your Amazon account and send themselves a color TV or something. So it tracks currently 8 million of these. And in order to unlock access to some of the functionality of that website, you have to register and log on. Well, the ability to register and log on has been locked now for, I think you said a couple of years during the video, presumably because the bad guys saw this as a threat to their revenue stream, and they were trying to add obfuscation information, trying to add good websites to mix it in with the bad to make the service overall less effective, less valuable.
Cat and mouse.
Yeah. One of the things I wanted to talk about is I find it really strange right now, and this is why the internet, has allowed for this emergence of an incredible global economy. Like with iPhones, you think what great technology that Apple came out with in 2008 or whenever it was. And of course they're made in China, but at the same time, the US, I think in the last week or 10 days has shot down, the US military has shot down 4 objects out of the sky over North America, presumably from China. I'm not sure that they've said conclusively, but I don't remember ever having anything shot down over the skies of North America. So like what that makes me think is, if you want to get into cybersecurity, does it matter if you live within the US, if you're an American citizen? Clearly you can't work for a TLA, I like calling them TLA agencies, a 3-letter acronym, the CIA, the FBI, the NSA. Clearly you can't work for one of them, but to work in cybersecurity, does it matter if you're a global citizen?
on the front of, hey, training and education and breaking into the industry as someone who's new and passionate and interested, I don't think it does matter your location or region. I maybe in, okay, the requirements and restraints of internet, but hey, if you've got internet, the world's your oyster, right? In my opinion, I feel like I've learned just about everything I know from YouTube and Google and resources, tutorials, stuff that is out online. That's how I cut my teeth on this, and maybe how I got at least as sharp as I am now. Understanding, and obviously, hey, yeah, I'm over here in the US. I don't know the reality for other spots, but I think it's a global playground at the moment, for better or for worse. Cybercrime runs rampant, right? But maybe it's a global battlefield if you draw that analogy. But getting into it, no, don't let that region or location be a blocker for you.
That's interesting. You call it the global battlefield because
sorry, maybe I hit a
well, I'm not sure if you or your colleagues have been impacted. I know that some people at Emsisoft and some people at partners who I've been in discussions with have been impacted by the war that Russia has brought to Ukraine, where I don't know that would have been the case ever so much as it is in the past, so much as it is today, where people can be anywhere in the world contributing to a common project. However, there happens to be a war going on in their backyard, and it's impacting their ability to execute trade, right? To work. So right. It's very strange, and it's all part of the the global economy and the internet, and to where it's going to go, who knows.
There's some big case studies, I think, with that on Colonial Pipeline. Hey, I think knee-jerk reaction to think of that. Hey, we just don't have gas in some parts of the U.S.
Yeah, yeah.
We get a little bit speculative, and I realize I try to walk with a certain amount of grace at the conversations of those world conflicts, Russia, Ukraine, etc. Because I think when we or humanity or society starts to say, is this the cyber war that we've all been thinking about, wondering, is it ever going to happen? What's the cyber war going to look like? Was this the cyber war? I don't know. We saw wiper malware and we saw some of those threats, but when folks on Reddit, when folks in whatever social media stuff get very, very brave behind the keyboard, and they sort of like pump their chest and say, hey, bring it on. We're ready for the cyber war in a weird way. No, you don't want that.
Right.
And sorry, I know, again, that's speculative and might be a hot topic, but I don't think that it's been a great change or stark contrast in a cyber war. To be very candid, artillery still works. So.
Yeah. Okay. Totally different subject. Brett, did you have one more thing?
No, I was just going to say that one of the most interesting aspects to me of the conflict has been the hacktivism. Just who is this? Are we looking at a collaboration of citizens? Is it an intelligence op masquerading as a collaboration of citizens? It's been very, very hard to tell what's going on.
Or perhaps the most ironic scenario, which is, threat actors from one company or from one country, deciding to attack another country or their threat actors. So suddenly the bad guys are good guys. So, who's friend kind of thing. Tough to track that.
Yeah.
Okay. One more line of questioning, of discussion. So, in spite of the fact that the requirement, as we talked about, the requirement for cybersecurity solutions hasn't shown any sign of slowing. The last year, 2022 and into 2023, has had broad layoffs across technology companies in general, and with a number of cybersecurity companies as well who haven't been immune to this. And this includes both smaller startups as well as larger, more established companies. And the New York Times actually had an interesting article last month that suggested that incredibly low interest rates had investor capital available like never before for speculative tech investments. And this is, I sort of referenced this when you talked about your potentially upcoming Series C, but we don't have to talk about that. I'm just interested. So the New York Times suggested that the tech industry of the last 15 years was built up by cheap money. And now that that time is over, at least for the immediate future, does it mean that there's going to be less innovation? Are the good guys going to be falling behind what the bad guys are able to do in terms of innovation?
Huh. That is a super good question. I think that maybe this is an optimist in me, or maybe a glass half full, right? I don't think we're going to lag behind, but I think maybe again, I don't know. First to admit here, my guesstimate for the future, not knowing what the economy is going to do, not knowing how layoffs might fall in, fade out. Our CEO, Kyle Hansloven, and so forgive me for tying this to Huntress, but I think he offered a very, very sharp golden sword at one point in just speaking to a reporter or a journalist, that it was tough to hear, but I think when we apply it to cybersecurity and we apply it to our industry and our world, it gets the point across. Because when we're trying to catch up, when we're trying to fight adversaries, and we're trying to stay on the front lines here, he said to companies, to businesses, to organizations that aren't staying at the front here, get it together or go out of business. Like, I don't know if that's going to be a factor with layoffs. I don't know if that's going to be, hey, churn for employees, for prospects, for customers. But I do think that you have a strange sort of natural selection in a weird, horrible way. What do you think? Am I missing the mark on that? But in the question of, are we going to lose pace? Are we going to lose our edge? Maybe some will, but I'm optimistic that the ones that don't lose are going to keep fighting and going to keep winning.
Yeah, I agree. I think there is a natural balance there. And as threats increase, then cybersecurity investments will increase again. It's a natural combination.
Yeah, it's kind of an unspoken dance, right? Where our dance partners are the bad guys, and every time they take a step, we're noticing, and every time we take a step, they're noticing us. So, whether, I guess it's a question of the number of companies that are involved in that dance, but there's still going to be a lot of really intelligent people working to provide the tools and the infrastructure to protect legitimate businesses. So
I'll never forget when I heard him say that. I don't know, it was like a weird sucker punch. Get it together or go out of business. Like, so deadpan.
Yeah. Actually, and it reminds me of another quote, and I can't remember what it is, from Kyle, and it was something to the effect of, the bad guys have to get everything right in order to succeed, whereas as a defender, as a company, you only have to get one thing right. So you can have multiple layers of protection throughout your network and your systems, and only one of them has to really work in order to block the bad guys from getting access. With that in mind, to wrap up, if you had one piece of advice for companies in order to protect themselves from cyber attacks, what would it be?
Oh, it's so hard to narrow it down to just one to get even something good or remotely, because they're,
or a theme.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to keep peddling or selling this whole thing, but I think that idea of defense in depth is, just because you were alluding to, the right thing to do. It's layers, it's compartments, it's putting up the separation, segmentation when you can. So I mentioned, hey, a little bit of a Coast Guard background for me, a little bit of a Navy, a little bit of seamanship to it. When I try to bring this picture to folks, I tell them, like, submarines. Look, submarine doing its thing underwater, constantly submerged, always has the pressure of water breaking in. If there's a hole, puncture in the wall, You got to have those watertight bulkheads. You got to have those tight compartments so that the water and the damage doesn't flood into the entire ship, but it stays restrained, it stays contained, and you limit the blast radius. And because if we get to the realization and understanding, assume breach, assume compromise, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. We're never too big to fail. If I'm saying that right. I have that in mind and know, like, hey, we're going to set up the best defenses and the best, board up the windows, lock all the doors the best we can. I realize that's not super tactical. It's not an immediate, hey, go change this registry key. But it's that mentality, I think, is we need to keep fostering for organizations, without a doubt.
I think, and I'll just build on that. I'll say that companies shouldn't assume that they can purchase a product and even implement the product, a single product, and that they're protected. Number one, no software is going to protect you from everything. Number two, no software is perfect as long as it has over 3,000 lines of code, I think was the conclusion that was reached in the 80s. And so defense in depth, as you said, and don't choose one solution and bet the farm on it.
No silver bullet, and can't have all your eggs in one basket. So
exactly. John, Brett, yes, please.
And get those basic rights, the dumb
Yes.
things that John talked
Patch.
about before. If you do get those right, you will significantly reduce the likelihood that you'll be the next victim.
Yeah. Update Windows, make sure you have all the patches, turn off RDP if it's not needed, don't expose it to the internet. Today is February the 15th. Yesterday, Apple and Microsoft both released a bunch of security patches. They should be implemented by now. Anyways.
Well, hey, gentlemen, this was a ton of fun. And thank you for letting me come hang out with you all. Again, just flattered, honored to be here with you both. My imposter syndrome was kicking in super hard, but just grateful for you to let me join you all. And this was a blast. Thank you.
John, thank you very much. You're a fantastic guest. Your breadth of knowledge and experience is wonderful. And it's been a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you again. And I wish you all the best.
Thanks, John.